Aww, how sweet! Yeah, you already know how this goes every year. This year I'm going to be talking about Much Ado About Nothing, a Shakespeare comedy. It's said to have been written between 1598 and 1599, and it was first performed around 1600. The story is set in Messina, at the home of Leonato. A messenger arrives with news that his friend Don Pedro is paying a visit and is bringing a couple of friends along with his brother. Those friends are Claudio and Benedick. Now, Beatrice, Leonato's niece, has a bit of a friendly rivalry with Benedick. Now, Don Pedro and the others plan to stay at least a month. Here we meet Don Pedro's brother, John. We'll get back to him in a second. Claudio falls in love with Leonato's daughter, Hero, and intends to marry her. Benedick hates marriage and tries to dissuade Claudio from marrying Hero, but Pedro thinks the marriage would be a wonderful idea. Benedick swears he will never marry, but Pedro is certain that he will when he meets the right girl. A masquerade ball is set up, and Claudio has Don Pedro disguise as himself so that he can woo Hero for him. Now, John doesn't really like the idea of people being happy, so he decides to tell Claudio that Don Pedro is wooing Hero for himself, but this is resolved quickly and Claudio and Hero's wedding is planned. Benedick and Beatrice dance together at the ball and start their little bickering. Since waiting for Claudio and Hero's wedding is a bit boring, Don Pedro and his men come up with an idea to get Beatrice and Benedick to fall in love with each other. Hero and her waiting woman Ursula are in on the plan too. What is the plan? Well, Don Pedro and some of his men are going to be having a conversation within earshot of Benedick. This conversation will be about how Beatrice is secretly in love with Benedick but is too afraid to tell him. Meanwhile, Hero and Ursula are having a conversation about how Benedick is madly in love with Beatrice, while Beatrice is within earshot. Benedick and Beatrice like the idea that one loves the other and plan to better themselves so they can declare their love. Now, Don John really doesn't like all this happiness going around, so he plans to stop the wedding, embarrass Don Pedro, and cause Leonato and Claudio misery. The evil plan is that Borachio, one of Don John's followers, will meet up with Hero's chambermaid Margaret, and she will pose as Hero. They will make it look like Hero is having an affair. That night, the plan is carried out, and Claudio plans to humiliate Hero publicly. The next day is the wedding, where Claudio does in fact humiliate Hero. Claudio leaves with Don Pedro, and Leonato is very mad at Hero. The friar, who is supposed to officiate the wedding, believes that Hero is innocent. The friar suggests that they fake Hero's death to make Claudio feel bad, and thus, restore Hero's reputation. Due to the stressful events, Benedick and Beatrice confess their love for each other. But to see if Benedick will be loyal to her, Beatrice tells him to kill Claudio. Benedick hesitates since Claudio is his best friend, but is swayed. Now, this is where Leonato puts the new plan into action. He and his brother Antonio blame Claudio for Hero's death and tell him as much. They also threaten him. Benedick also challenges Claudio to a duel. Now, if you recall in the other Shakespeare comedies I've covered, there's usually a B story going along with the main one. Well, this B story features the local watch, or police force. On the night Don John put his plan into motion, the watch overheard Borachio discussing the plan with Conrad, another of Don John's followers. The watch arrests Borachio and Conrad, and even though they're not the brightest, they do manage to get a confession out of Borachio and Conrad. Now back to the present. Right after Benedick challenges Claudio to a duel, the watch arrive and inform Leonato that Hero is innocent due to the confessions of Borachio and Conrad. Don John has fled, but don't worry, there is an order to capture him. Well, now Claudio feels even worse. Leonato demands that the only way to right this wrong is for Claudio to marry Antonio's daughter, who looks very similar to Hero. Claudio agrees to do so, and when the wedding day comes, he discovers that Hero is not dead after all! Yay! Claudio is very happy now. Beatrice and Benedick publicly declare their love for each other. Right then, a messenger arrives letting everyone know that Don John has been captured, but Benedick tells everyone that they can worry about it after the festivities. They celebrate and live happily ever after. The end. Alright, let's analyze. Like the other Shakespeare comedies I've analyzed, this one follows the structure of restoring order. The order was disturbed by Don John, and then it was restored by the end with 2 weddings. As I mentioned before, Shakespeare likes to end his comedies with more than 1 wedding. I'm sure you could tell there's a lot of deception here. It's used in 2 ways. One way is to cause chaos and disorder. That would be Don John trying to stop the wedding between Hero and Claudio. The other way deception is used is to bring Beatrice and Benedick together. And well, I guess you could say that there's a third way deception is used, and that's to bring Claudio and Hero back together. It's interesting to look at. Now, there's one thing I want to mention. I'm sure many of you noticed that Hero faking her death in order to get Claudio to feel bad and then eventually revealing that she's not dead and they live happily ever after feels weirdly similar to another play. Except that play ended in a tragedy. I always like to tell people that Much Ado About Nothing is Romeo and Juliet if the plan actually worked. Overall, I really enjoyed this play. It's well written, it's funny, and it's a good time. This play has had many film adaptations, starting from a silent film released in 1913 to Anyone But You, which was released last year. I have seen the 1993 film adaptation and I enjoy it immensely. I think you will too. I'd recommend this play for ages 15 and up. The language is a bit hard to understand and there are quite a few mature themes, but I can guarantee that you will have a good time with this story. I love this story, especially around Valentine's Day. It's really fun and has a satisfying ending. I hope each and every one of you enjoy it as much as I do. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone, and happy reading!